Hello dear friends, this is Bob Hatton, this is The Encourager. So glad that you're here today, and I'm so happy to continue this story about God's great plan, what he has for us, that we have a look at this magnificent picture, this big picture that he has painted for us. We finished part 1 yesterday, and today we start in part 2, but part 1 didn't end very good, did it? God destroyed the world, and there's just a few people who could escape this destruction, who got into the ark. There was Noah and his wife and his 3 sons and their three wives, and they were saved. They came through this great flood to start all over again. God regretted that he had created man. Now he's going to start again. So we got part 2 now, and part 2 starts with Noah starting a new civilization. And Noah was a good guy. The Bible tells us he was righteous and he lived with God. But unfortunately, this goodness, this righteousness, this living with God, it wasn't something that he could multiply, that he wasn't something that he could transfer to his descendants. And it's not very long, there's a few generations past us. There's quite a lot of people, the families were big, the people were living longer in those days. But after a few generations, there's many people living on the face of the earth. These people are in the dynasty of Cain. Maybe they didn't come from Cain's dynasty as far as the genealogy is concerned, but according to their attitude and according to the way they were thinking, they were the people who were saying, we want to do it our way. I did it my way. I don't care who's saying anything about us. Somehow they knew, they could remember that there's supposed to be a God, and this God wants us to bring a blood sacrifice to be reconciled with him, but never mind that, we'll do it our way. And they got together and they said, well, I've got a good idea how we could do it, because if we're not careful, we'll be scattered all over the world. So let's make a name for ourselves. Let's build a tower. This was called the Tower of Babel, and we can read about it in Genesis chapter 11. So they started building this tower, and they said, this tower is going to be so high that it will reach into heaven. Never mind these blood sacrifices. Never mind what this God supposedly has said that we're going to do. We will do it our way. We will build an alternative access to heaven. We will build something, and we will make a name for ourselves, so that we won't be scattered over the face of the earth. And so God hears about this in heaven, and he says, come on, let's go and have a look what's happening down there. And he comes down to the men and he sees what they're doing, and he's a little bit amused, and he does something. He strikes the languages, and they're all speaking one language. And then suddenly, when God intervenes in this massive building program, they all start speaking different languages. They can't understand one another. And I suppose there's some friction, there's some fighting and so on. And they separate. And the nations of the world are born there in Genesis chapter 11. And then they're scattered over the face of the earth. Exactly that what they wanted to prevent now changes. Now happens. They are scattered over the face of the earth. So God thinks, I've got to start something again. This story is not finished. It wasn't finished with the flood. It's not finished now with the Tower of Babel. It continues, and God he's got something in mind. He knows what he's doing. He's not flustered. He's not in panic because things are not working out at the beginning. He chooses a man to come into the story for the next stage of this journey. And this man is a guy called Abraham. Now, Abraham, he becomes the father of faith for the Christians. In Galatians, in the book of Galatians, it says there that all who believe are the sons of Abraham, or Abraham is the father of all believe. And of course, the Christian religion came out of Judaism, and the Jews also recognized Abraham as the father of their faith. But not enough that, the Muslims too, they recognize Abraham as being the father of their faith. Well, he wasn't called Abraham at that time. God changed his name later. Right now, when we start, he's called Abram. And Abraham, we would think he must be a mighty man, but he wasn't actually. He was a normal man. He was a man with many flaws. And when we read in Joshua chapter 24 and verse 2, when Joshua is reflecting on where they've come from, and he starts to talk about Abraham, and he mentions that Abraham, he lived on the other side of the river Euphrates in a city called Ur in the Chaldeans, and he was an idol worshipper. He was an idol worshipper. He wasn't somebody who was a cut above the others who knew and had greater revelation. He was an idol worshipper. And we know from the history that the people in that area of the world, they used to worship the moon god. And that's where Abraham was. We don't know whether it was Ur down in the south in Iraq on the river Euphrates, or there's another city called Ur, which is further north in Turkey. And so it could have been one or the other. It doesn't really matter. But he was an idol worshipper. And not only that, he married his sister. Sarah was his sister, and it didn't bother Abraham to lie about her, to cheat about her. And when he was about 80, he didn't bother. He spent a night or two with his servant girl Hagar. That didn't bother him one little bit. So he wasn't really a shining example, but God chose him anyway. And it's not always the shining examples that God chooses. He chooses who he wants to choose. I'm so grateful that he chose me. Although I'm not one of the high-flying guys, I'm just a normal guy, and I am also very flawed. But God in his love, he chose me. If we read 1 Corinthians chapter 1, it tells us, Paul says to the people in the church in Corinth, he says, don't think you're so good because I've looked at you, and there's not so many noble people among you. There's not so many intelligent people among you. God has chosen that which is weak. He's chosen that which is foolish in the eyes of this world, because he wants to do something special, and he wants to confound the pride of the strong, the pride of those who are noble, the pride of those who are intelligent. He wants to confound that to show that the power is in God. So he chooses you and he chooses me, or he chooses me anyway. Maybe you are one of these noble, intelligent and strong people, but he chooses you as well. But he also chooses people like me who are weak and not any good for anything, because he wants to do something through them. And that is the beginning of this second part. He chooses Abraham because he's got something special for him to do. So I'll leave you with that. I think this second part of the story is very exciting, and I'm excited about that. Can't wait to get back to you. So God bless you. See you again. You're Bob Hatton, your encourager.